I never expected a poor boy's piano playing to turn into a heartbreaking transformation. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The air was thick with tension, like a balloon about to pop. I could see him there, a scrawny figure hunched over an old piano in the corner of the park. His fingers danced over the yellow keys, each note echoing through the hushed crowd. A haunting melody spilled out, enveloping us. It was beautiful, yet heartbreaking. He looked like he belonged to the shadows, with a coat 2 sizes too big and shoes that seemed to have seen better days. But when he played, the world shifted. The whispers of the onlookers faded, replaced by the sound of a boy pouring his soul into every note. I felt it in my chest, a tight knot of emotions I couldn't quite name. The sunlight caught his tear-streaked cheeks, and I realized he was more than just another boy from the streets. He was someone in pain, yet somehow, he transformed it into something stunning. As I watched, I noticed the lady with the red scarf standing close by. She was frozen, mouth agape as if she had just seen a ghost. Her eyes glistened with a mix of awe and sorrow. I glanced at her and caught her breath hitching, shaking her head as if trying to wake from a dream. I wanted to scream, to shake her and ask her what she was feeling. Why did this boy's music stir such deep emotions in us all? Suddenly, the melody morphed. It grew darker, more urgent. I felt the weight of it pressing down on my heart. The boy's fingers moved faster, fiercely hitting the keys, each strike powerful and desperate. People around me stepped back, a ripple of shock racing through the crowd. Was this a song of hope or a cry for help? Then came the moment. Just as he crescendoed into a haunting finale, the piano screeched. A note clashed sharply, filling the air with an unsettling tension. I saw the boy's hands tremble, his confidence shaking. The magic faded into a harsh reality as the final note screamed like a siren. Silence fell like a blanket, smothering the whispers of disbelief. I knew in that moment, everything had changed. This was no ordinary performance. It was raw, electric, a glimpse into a life filled with pain, beauty, and perhaps, an escape. But then, as the crowd began to part, a shadow flickered behind him. Was it someone watching? Or something more sinister? My heart raced. I needed to know. Who was this boy, and what darkness lingered just out of sight? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. In the silence that followed the boy's final note, something shifted in the air. The crowd, which had once been mesmerized, now filled with palpable uncertainty. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs, a mix of fear and a need to understand this boy who had poured himself into his music. Just beyond the last echoes of his melody, confusion and curiosity mingled. The lady with the red scarf stepped forward, her expression a fragile blend of empathy and pain. I followed her gaze, fixated on the boy who seemed to shrink into himself, gathering his frayed coat around him as though shielding against an unseen threat. Was that dread I saw flicker in his eyes as he scanned the crowd? I wanted to reach him, to ask if he needed help, but something held me back. My feet felt glued to the ground as my mind raced. What could I possibly say to bridge the chasm between us, a boy who seemingly carried the weight of the world on his shoulders and someone lost in their own labyrinth of questions? As the crowd began to disperse, I spotted a young girl lingering near the piano's faded wood. Kneeling down, she carefully placed a crumpled bill atop the keyboard, her tiny fingers trembling. "You were amazing," she whispered, her voice tinged with awe. The boy looked up, a glimmer of surprise sparking in his eyes. For a heartbeat, I witnessed a transformation. The shadows didn't seem so daunting. Something pure surged between them, a connection stitched together through music and admiration. But the moment was fleeting. The boy turned his gaze back to the ground, the light slipping away like water through fingers. I felt a pang of sadness watching him retreat again, as though the weight of gratitude was too heavy for his weary heart. Then, just when I had almost understood his pain, a man emerged from the periphery of the crowd, a burly figure, the type that radiates authority, but whose energy dripped like poison. He approached with determination, eyes locked on the boy. "Hey." His voice boomed, and the girl instinctively stepped back, fear flickering across her face. "What do you think you're doing? You're supposed to be at the shelter, not out here playing for free." At these words, the boy flinched but stood his ground, shoulders straightening gradually. I could see the fire within ignite, but it was tempered by a flicker of familiarity, a recognition of something darker. "Leave him alone." I blurted out before I could think twice, the outburst surprising even me. The man turned slowly to face me, an arched eyebrow questioning my audacity. "Who are you?" he asked, his tone laced with irritation, but I could also detect a hint of confusion. "Just someone who believes in what he's doing," I said, my voice steady despite the apprehension crawling up my spine. "He's not hurting anyone." The boy caught my eye then, and in that electric exchange, I could sense a fleeting glimmer of hope. But just as quickly, the tension tightened around us like a noose. "Hope?" The man chuckled sarcastically. "You think hope will save him? He belongs where he can't disrupt normal people's lives." With that, the boy flinched again, and my heart shattered just a little more. The warmth from the moment with the little girl seemed to evaporate, leaving a chill in its wake. The man grabbed the boy's arm, trying to pivot him away from the piano, fiery indignation simmering just below the surface. "Please," the boy murmured, barely audible against the cacophony of my own racing thoughts. I wanted to scream, to intervene, but my legs felt like lead and my voice lost in the rush of adrenaline. Then, in that split second of turmoil, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a reminder that I had a life outside this moment, a routine, and responsibilities. But all I could think about was the boy facing the man, and the shadows that lingered, threatening to swallow him whole. I reached for my phone, wanting to do something, anything, but when I glanced up, my breath caught in my throat. The boy's gaze was locked onto mine, an indescribable abyss of sorrow and fear, but something else lurked beneath, an unspoken question that begged for an answer. Suddenly, the world around us seemed to dissolve, and it hit me then, like a tidal wave crashing upon a fragile shore. If I didn't act now, I might lose this boy to his demons forever. Just as I opened my mouth to call out again, something unexpected happened. A siren blared in the distance, igniting a rush of panic. The man's grip faltered momentarily, his eyes darting towards the sound. It was a distraction, a respite in the storm, but how long would it last? Would it be enough? And as fate would have it, amid the chaos, the boy looked down at the uncovered keys of the piano, his eyes narrowing in determination. The question loomed heavier than ever: how far would he go to protect his music, his escape, his very soul? My heart raced as I waited for his next move, a revelation coursing through the air, charged with the tremors of an uncertain future. The siren's wail seemed to blanket the moment in a surreal hush. The man's grip on the boy slackened, a fraction of a chance whispering through the air. Desperation flared in my chest, pushing me to take a step forward, but the weight of the world pulled me back, a tidal force in a storm-swept sea. The boy's gaze flickered between the man and me, a silent plea, tangled in fear and determination. His fingers brushed the piano keys lightly, and I sensed a flicker of defiance igniting from within. This was not just about food or shelter or the broken promises of adults. It was about claiming a small fragment of his life, the one untrammeled piece where he could mold the chaos into something beautiful. With the siren fading into the distance, the moment stretched taut, like an unstrung bow ready to snap. I could almost taste the tension, thick and acrid. "Don't you dare lay a hand on him!" I called out, my voice tremulous, but imbued with a fierce tenacity I didn't know I had. The man darted his gaze back to me, anger flashing in his eyes, but there was uncertainty now, to a flicker of doubt. "He doesn't belong out here. He's just a kid." The words slipped out, desperate to pierce through his hardened shell. "Music doesn't harm anyone. It can heal. You must see that." The man bristled, crossing his arms as if to shield his own beliefs. You think a song can save him? It can save his spirit. I was almost pleading, the frustration surging through me. Look at what he does. For just a moment, people forget their troubles. That's worth fighting for, isn't it? But as I spoke, his attention drifted back to the boy, who had closed his eyes, lost in a world of sound, a sanctuary far removed from the mounting pressures lining his reality. He took a deep breath, fingers poised, and suddenly began to play a haunting melody that wrapped around us like the embrace of a long-lost friend. The notes echoed, piercing through the growing tension, an ethereal bridge connecting the boy's heart to ours. As he played, I noticed the way the furrow in his brow softened, how the music shimmered around him as though lifting the weight from his shoulders. For that moment, I could feel the crowd stilling, curious faces leaned in, drawn by his pain, his joy, and the raw honesty flowing through the air. The music built, I dared to look at the man, the authoritarian facade faltering, his lips trembling slightly, conflicting emotions flickering in the depths of his eyes. He seemed to wrestle with a battle as old as time, one pitting duty against understanding, isolation against the warmth of connection. But then, a soul-crushing realization struck me hard, a shadow creeping into my thoughts. Would this moment of beauty even be enough? Would the music draw the man back to sweetness, or would it only deepen his desire to snuff the boy's spark? My heart ached in solidarity with the boy as his small fingers danced, a comet blazing through the night. Yet, doubt clawed within me. What hope could possibly survive against the solid walls of disdain that surrounded him every day? But then, unexpected kindness broke through. From somewhere deep in the crowd, a pair of voices joined the boy's song, two older women, each sharing a verse. A ragged harmony soared into the air, wrapping around the boy's melody like a warm embrace. In that instant, against the backdrop of uncertainty, I saw the boy's lips twitch, curving into a tentative smile. The slightest hint of hope ignited behind his eyes, a miraculous flame flickering against the winter chill, yet just as quickly, the illusion shattered when the man roared, "Enough!" The sound thundered over the melody, carved from the same stone as his heart, jagged and unyielding. He stepped forward, his face a mask, ready to reclaim control, ready to silence the beauty of a moment that could have altered a life, and just like that, the music ceased, dissolving into echoes of what could have been. My breath hitched as a whisper of despair crept back into the air, smothering the warmth. Why do you insist on making his life harder? I pushed, fueled by the desperation bubbling within. But then, stark realization struck, a cruelty so heavy that it sent shivers down my spine. Would the boy even have this opportunity for solace again? I hesitated, the fear that came with that truth rippling through me like a cold wave. The boy, however, seemed resolute in his calm. With his chin raised defiantly, he gazed straight into the man's eyes. It was as if he understood the stakes, the tempest swirling just beyond this moment. Would he stand strong against the oncoming storm, or would he fold under its weight? As the man stepped closer, fingers twitching with anger, I felt my heart pummel in panic. Time hung suspended, the moment unspeakably fragile. Unbeknownst to any of us, the inflection point was upon a precipice where dreams teetered and where lives intersected. I reached out, desperate to intervene, but my own voice faltered under the weight of fate. Would I have the courage to bridge the chasm that separated us? Would I find my voice again, or would the boy's music be stifled forever, leaving only echoes of what could have been? The boy's eyes locked onto mine, filled with an energy that demanded acknowledgement. Something surged within, felt primal, electric. Then, without thinking, I took as steep a leap into the unknown, ready to set something into motion that could change everything. The world tilted, and in that heartbeat, we were poised at a crossroads. The future trembled just beyond our grasp, and I knew deep down this was far from over. The silence that followed the man's thunderous outburst felt like a heavy fog settling dangerously low, pressing down on everyone, sowing uncertainty into the very fabric of the air. I stood there, teetering on the edge, emotion coursing through my veins like molten steel, threatening to consume me. The boy's hopeful gaze felt heavy as if it had woven itself into my very being, urging me to act, to defend. Please, just give him a moment, I managed, my voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos swirling inside me. The man's untamed features were relentless, hardened by battles I knew nothing about, but I couldn't let him turn away now, not when the very lifeblood of that boy's dreams was at stake. That he hesitated, barely perceptible, but it was there, a crack in the facade. His shoulders, tense with the weight of the world, wavered slightly. I seized that moment. "Look at him," I urged, half in wonder, half in desperation. "He's not just playing for himself. He brings something so precious to the world, something that can light fires in the darkest of hearts." That a flicker of conflict danced in the man's eyes, his lips pressed tightly together as if sealing away the pain that threatened to spill forth. For a heartbeat, I recognized a reflection of deep-seated sorrow mingled with fear, the same shadows that loomed behind the boy's brave exterior. The boy, oblivious to the whirlwind around him, began to play again. His small fingers moved delicately, coaxing out notes like fragile butterflies in a sunlit meadow, each note carrying echoes of hope, of shared dreams, and a will to survive. The melody hung between us, defying all odds, if only for an instant, and then, rather unexpectedly, the crowd stirred again. Someone raised their voice, a man wrapped in tattered clothes, with bare feet and a heart full of scars. "Let the kid play. We need this, don't we?" His words reverberated against the night, stirring something within those of us who desperately craved connection. The rest of the crowd began murmuring, a swell of agreement rising, reflecting the shared acceptance of our human fragility. The man's expression darkened, his next words dripping with bitterness. "You think he's just a distraction? This world is unforgiving, and he's playing a game he can't win, or maybe," I whispered, my heart racing, "he's teaching us how to live amidst the chaos." I could feel the momentum shifting like a wave cresting, ready to crash into the shore. Suddenly, one of the older women's voices returned, soaring higher, her tones wrapping around the boy's haunting melody. It was soft, almost tentative, yet still fierce. Others began to join in, not just the two older women but others from the crowd, their voices merging together to create a chorus that unfurled like a tapestry, which had once seemed so fragile. The boy's smile broadened, his spirit illuminated against the graying sky, each note a reminder that beauty could exist alongside despair. It felt like a fragile but defiant rebellion, like flickers of light battling against encroaching shadows. Then, inexplicably, the man began to waver, caught in the psychic crossfire between his anger and the raw emotions cascading around us. I saw the moment where he almost connected with the humanity enveloping him, the moment where the hard shell of resentment began to crack, but just then, a siren blared again in the distance, rising ominously. The cacophony rattled through the crowd, and with it came a soul-wrenching dilemma. The man's shield up, he pivoted slightly, his expression transforming to something dark and steely, reasserting control he felt slipping away. "This is over," he bellowed, his voice drowning out the music, unraveling the piece we had clung to so fervently. The smiles faded, coiling into tension as the faces around me transformed, a collective heart sinking as one. I could feel the warmth of hope snatched away, leaving a raw ache, a stark contrast to the harmony we had dared to carve out of the darkness, and in that surge of emotion, something snapped within me, igniting an ember of courage that would not be extinguished. I stepped forward, heart racing as I grasped the boy's shoulder, steering him a step back, my eyes locked with his, fiercely. "Help me remind him of what matters." The boy's gaze didn't falter, he nodded resolutely, the defiance brightening behind those darkened clouds. But as I turned to face the man, a shocking revelation gripped my heart, a sense of recognition. "You lost someone, didn't you?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them, catalyzed by moments spent searching for a way to understand. The intensity of the moment surged, the crowd holding its breath, as I watched him stagger back, the raw pain surfacing against his will, visible scars etched across his exterior, transforming into a tempest of rage and sorrow. "You don't know anything about me," he spat. But there was fragility in his voice, a tremor that belied the anger. "I know that you protect what you love. But what are you doing right now?" I challenged, imploring him to recognize the life in the boy's music rather than trying to drown it with despair. In the throbbing silence that followed, I saw a moment where the past and present collided. The man's throat tightened, his hands trembling slightly. But before I could process this shift, the clarion call of sirens reached a deafening crescendo, drowning out our connection. He stepped back, his eyes locking with mine, and then he turned, moving toward the chaos just beyond our fragile sanctuary. Wait. I screamed, my voice tearing through the stillness, but he was already swallowed by the shadows, a figure retreating into darkness. My heart raced as I turned back to the boy, who had watched the exchange unfold, uncertainty clouding his eyes. It struck me then that I had peeled back one layer of the storm without knowing whether the skies would open wide or leave us drenched in unending rain. Stay strong, I whispered, gripping his shoulder with fervor, anchoring us both in a battle that was far from over, knowing it never could be again. The melody crescendoed in the air, a bittersweet refrain, and with it came the realization that what awaited us was an uncertain journey, laden with choices both terrifying and transformative. Yet even amidst the uncertainty, I felt a tether, a spark that illuminated the path ahead, even if it was impossibly dim. Tomorrow, the battle would resume, and we would have to find the courage to face the storm once more, together, but all I could think about as the boy's eyes shimmered with uncertainty was what would lie beyond this moment, what flicker of light hidden in the shadows of the heart would guide us through the darkness. I stood at the edge of the crowd, surrounded by specters of lost dreams swirling in the suffocating fog that followed the man's retreat. The boy's bright melody hung stubbornly in the air, bearing witness to the fracture in reality we had just glimpsed. As the last notes echoed, they drew out murmurs, echoes of disappointment and fear, questioning the possibilities of redemption that seemed just a breath away. In that weighty silence where hope wrestled with despair, I felt a knot in my chest, pulling tighter with each moment. The boy, with his hopeful eyes now dulled by uncertainty, squirmed under the weight of expectation that seemed to hover like a specter. I yearned to reach out, to reassure him, yet something gripped my throat, silencing all the encouragement I wanted to spill forth. Was that enough? He finally whispered, his voice breaking through the tapestry of silence. Did I play it right? I knelt before him, forcing a smile, despite the heaviness threatening to crush me. You played beautifully. You brought joy, even for just a moment. But as I looked into his eyes, I could see the storm still brewing beneath his fragile exterior. But what if he never lets me play again? The tremor in his voice was a jagged edge, slicing through the remnants of hope. Before I could respond, a soft touch brushed against my arm, a weary old woman, her face marked by time and hardship. He doesn't know what he's saying, dear, she murmured, her voice gentle yet worn. The darkness has a way of making us timid when we should be bold. I want to be bold, the boy replied, his eyes wide, seeking affirmation. The innocence in his voice felt like a beacon in the murky waters of hopelessness. Then let's be brave together, I said, unable to suppress the flicker of defiance resurgent within me. You've already shown us that music can unite. You imagine what would happen if you played again right now. His gaze darted around the crowd, seeking reassurance from those who still lingered. Their breaths collectively held a blanket of uncertainty knit tightly around us all. Come with me, I instructed, slowly rising as I extended my hands toward him. Hesitantly, he took hold, and together we stepped into the heart of our makeshift gathering, silence wrapping around us like a shroud. Maybe you can play while I tell a story, I suggested, the idea bursting forth in a half-dazed escape from despair. A story of courage, friendship, and this beautiful gift you have to share. With that, he nodded, stealing glances at the crowd, searching for encouragement in their faces. The old woman smiled broadly, as did others, but it was the music that enveloped him first. Drawing a deep breath, he climbed onto the old stool near the piano. His fingers danced nervously above the keys, and then with a gentle press, notes began to emerge, a blossoming sound cutting through the impediments of doubt that pressed against us all. That I began to speak, weaving words together like a fragile thread, recounting tales of hope that had flickered through my life, a collection of moments when light had pierced my darkest days. I saw the way the crowd began to lean in closer, soaking in the warmth of remembrance, where despair could not tread, but midway through my recitation, a figure appeared at the back of the crowd, a silhouette familiar yet shrouded in unease. It was the man from earlier, his features shadowed by the dim light as he watched from afar. My heart clenched at the sight of his stony expression, wondering if he regretted unleashing the storm that had shaken our ragged sanctuary. As the boy's notes intermingled with my voice, a peculiar hush enveloped the area, drawing a curtain over the chaos that had threatened to consume us. But while the harmony felt tangible, I caught the glimmer of conflict in the man's eyes, as if music had unlocked a door to memories long buried. Maybe he won't keep me from playing. The boy's voice trembled as he played with more determination, lifting us alongside him. Maybe this is what we need together. I could sense the ripple of connection expanding through the crowd. Something unspoken and undeniable settled into the silence that had wrapped itself around us. Unexpected kindness seeped into the cracks of our struggle, filling the void left by despair, a tapestry woven through shared stories and dreams. Yet as I met the man's gaze again, a chill lapped against the momentum of our fragile assembly. From the corner of my eye, I noticed something, an uneasy shift in the crowd as the faint sound of sirens pulsed ominously in the distance, drawing closer. The man's eyes darkened, a storm of emotion roiling beneath the surface. The tangible connection we had crafted wavered under the weight of that familiar dread. With every note the boy played, I felt time slipping through our fingers, the fragile tether that had bound us in hope beginning to fray, and I realized we stood on the precipice once again. The boy glanced at me, uncertainty shadowing his heart. Are they coming to take me away? No, I uttered firmly, even as my own heart quaked with doubt. Not if we stay strong. We are stronger together. Just as the sirens crescendoed into an unbearable din, the man took a step forward, breaking free from the shadows, and I knew then that we stood on the threshold of something profound and terrifying. His voice pierced the night, a low rumble fraught with urgency. We have to leave. Now. Before I could respond, the boy's hand stilled on the keys, and the crowd shifted uneasily, confusion crackling in the air. What's happening? He asked, fear creeping back into his tone, and in that heart-stopping moment, I grabbed his hand tightly. I refused to let go, even as the darkness pressed in around us and the sirens howled like banshees in the night. Would we be able to fight against the tide of chaos together, or would the shadows claim our hopes in their relentless embrace? The uncertain weight of that question hung in the air, heavy and unyielding, and I knew we were on the brink of a truth that would either shatter or unite us. In the distance, a shadow approached, but as uncertainty clawed at my spirit, a new realization tickled the edges of my heart. The boy, with his music, might be our salvation, or the very catalyst that would render our fragile unity undone. The weight of the moment pressed down on me, the boy's hand trembling in mine. I could hear the cacophony of sirens in the distance, the urgency swelling like a tide intent on swallowing us whole. I glanced back at the man who had previously instigated our unraveling, the storm behind his eyes threatening to unleash its fury. As the crowd began to disperse, a sense of desperation flared within me. I pulled the boy closer, the familiar warmth of his small hand a reminder of innocence mixed with the reality of impending chaos. Stay with me, I whispered, urging him to hold tight, knowing that in this turbulent world, we were each other's anchors. That I breathed deep, gathering strength. Let's play one more song together, I suggested, my voice a tremor against the roaring fear around us. You can still bring us hope. The boy turned to me, confusion crinkling his brow as he searched for reassurance. But before he could respond, the man stepped closer, a mixture of anger and longing twisting his features. You don't understand. This isn't a game. You could get hurt. They're just sounds, the boy interjected, his eyes shimmering like the stars that seldom graced our city's sky. But together, they can mean something. Just as he spoke, a flicker of light passed across the man's face, almost reminiscent of a time before shadows had claimed him. But that recognition vanished as swiftly as it had emerged, and I could sense the internal battle raging. Please, I added softly, trying to piece together the fragments of courage. Let him play. Music can heal wounds we cannot see. The man hesitated, the sirens growing closer, and at that moment, another figure emerged from the gathering dusk, an older boy who had hung back, eyes darting with anxiety. He rushed forward, his expression interlocking fear and resolve. What's going on? He demanded, his gaze flicking between us and the man. They're coming. The man yelled, his voice raw with urgency, we need to move. No. The older boy cried. Please don't take him away. Not now. His plea struck a chord deep within me. The power of unity was beginning to manifest, a lifeline pulling us together in desperate times. This is a chance, I urged, reaching out for the older boy. If we stand strong, we can protect each other. With a firm nod, the older boy turned to the crowd, summoning his own voice to lift the chaos that had descended. If you can hear us, we need you. We have to stay together. Music can keep us safe. Join us. Some in the crowd seemed to hesitate, uncertainty freezing their feet to the ground. I felt the air thrum with shared tension, but then the hesitant notes of a flute joined the boy's piano, turning singular music into a chorus. A woman with a violin stepped forward, her eyes lit with desperation for communion. One by one, instruments began to emerge from the chaos around a guitar, a clarinet, voices rising in harmony, merging with the boy's melody. The music began to swell, the notes woven tight and rich, pushing back against the sirens, drowning out despair with an exuberant declaration of existence. Yes. Just like that. I encouraged, as the boy's fingers regained their fluidity, dancing across the keys as if the fears in the world outside had momentarily ceased to exist. Amidst the cacophony, I turned just in time to see the man, now rooted in place, mouth slightly agape as he listened. His hard expression softened for the briefest of moments, glimpses of longing appearing in his eyes, a bittersweet flicker of hope tangled with regret. But before I could cement that connection with my gaze, a sudden tumult broke forth. From behind, a cacophony of footsteps and shouts erupted as the shadows grew, blending into the vibrant mosaic of music. The crowd began to press further back, eyes turned anxiously toward the emerging dangers. Now more than ever, I felt the boy's grip on my hand tighten, and I could see the dawning realization settle upon him. The song we played might not shield us from what was coming but would become a stand against the darkness. And then, amidst the ensemble's rapture, a figure emerged, one that sent a chill coursing through my veins. A girl with long braids and an unmistakable defiance written in her stance stepped into view, the haunting echoes of our music radiated from her presence. Muffled conversations erupted around us as whispers of "it can't be her" flitted through the crowd. I felt the boy's warmth by my side begin to waver, uncertainty returning as the girl's gaze met his, a fusion of recognition and question sparking between them. "Do you remember me?" she said, her voice cutting through the notes like a jagged shard. My breath caught in my throat at the emerging revelation. Who was she? Why did she seem to command attention despite the chaos closing in? With that simple question, I realized we stood on the brink of a new frequency, where destiny vibrated in unison with the urgent heartbeat of our fears. The melodies kept flowing, the innocence amid turmoil beckoning waves of unpredictable changes. Hope flickered and danced, but the impending fight for survival loomed ever closer, shrouded in shadow. As the girl drew closer, as if propelled by a magnetic force, the ground beneath us seemed to shift. Would her arrival mutate the fabric of our fragile hope, bringing either salvation or despair? As I held the boy's trembling hand, the question loomed larger than life itself. The air around us vibrated with the fragile symphony of our desperation and hope. Muffled voices churned in the crowd, fragments of conversations shooting through the air like arrows seeking their targets. Whispers of disbelief and recognition blurred into a tapestry of anticipation. I could feel the tension pooling in the pit of my stomach, the looming uncertainty fluttering at the edges of my thoughts. The girl, with her defiant posture and piercing gaze, stepped closer, and the music swelled in response. It was as if the very essence of our unity hung delicately by a thread, poised to unravel at the slightest tremor. The boy beside me was rooted, his small frame trembling not from fear, but from the weight of memory threatening to wash over him like a tidal wave. I adjusted my grip on his hand, a silent promise that I would protect him from whatever tempest was brewing. "Do you remember me?" The girl's voice, sharp yet tender, echoed through the notes of the music, fracturing the heart of our sanctuary. My breath locked in my throat, each note becoming a pulse reverberating through the bond we shared. I watched the boy's eyes widen, flickering between recognition and confusion. They said you were gone," he stammered, the innocent thrill of rediscovery tinged with disbelief. "Yes," she breathed, those two syllables weighted with years of separation and loss. Her gaze swept across the crowd, offering a connection that felt electric. "But I'm here now," the musician's notes ebbed and flowed, weaving around her words like a protective layer. The air was charged with the collective breath of the crowd, our shared miracle holding the despair at bay for now. With her presence, she began to weave a spell, pulling everyone into an intimate circle of remembrance and belonging. As the boy continued to stare at her, a kaleidoscope of emotions washed over his features. Confusion melted into surprise and finally settled into a soft glow of hope. His fingers danced back to the keys, the torrent of his melody infused with something deeper, richer. The air thickened with nostalgia, and the notes took on familiar shapes. It was as if the boy's heart was sharing its forgotten secrets with her, yet, lurking beneath the surface of this reunion was an unsettling current. I could feel the man from before, still nearby, his anguish twisted into something dark. He stood apart, a silent sentinel cloaked in shadows, his expression twisted between yearning and pain. It was a look I recognized, one that hummed with the kind of remorse that could tear hearts asunder. The thrum of the music rose to a tight crescendo, but just as it threatened to reach its peak, a tremor ran through the gathered crowd. An urgent shout rang out, "They're here!" Panic flared like a match struck against kerosene. The atmosphere shifted from hopeful to a near-violent urgency in an instant, our fragile world beginning to splinter. Despite the alarm, the girl stood firm. "We have to keep playing," she urged, a fire igniting in her voice. "We can't let them take this away from us." But the moment of unity began to fray as fear clawed at the edges of resolve. People began to scatter, the sound of rushing feet replaced the melody that had offered so much solace. "No!" I cried out, my voice slicing through the dissonance like a lifeline. "Stay! Hold on to one another." I turned to the older boy, who had taken charge earlier. "We can't let them break us apart," yet the crowd, swamped with fear, was increasingly unruly. As the music waned, people jostled and collided, the symphony dissolving into a panicked cacophony. Just then, the man stepped closer again, his expression slipping back into that rigid mask of determination. "You!" he snapped, directing his ire at the girl, his words laced with bitter intensity. "You have to leave. You don't know what you're doing. You'll only bring more chaos." Her confidence faltered as his words struck home, the weight of his truth heavy enough to make her blink. "I came back for him," she replied quietly, the defiance wavering like a flickering candle. "I can help." "No," he growled, and the crumbling tension surged once more, threatening to spill over. "You can't help anyone. You'll only make things worse." The boy beside me tugged at my sleeve, his eyes darting between the two. "She's right, you can't give up," he urged softly, his voice almost lost among the rising tide of uncertainty. "We can fight this together." Tension broke like a wave crashing against the shore as I felt the ground beneath us tremble. The faint sound of sirens cut sharply through the air. I knew, instinctively, that time was running out. As fear clustered like shadows, threatening to swallow us whole, I realized what was at stake. The girl's return was a beacon, yes, but it could also ignite older wounds and awaken ghosts long buried. Our fragile community teetered on the brink of collapse, and just as I thought I could grasp the strands of connection we had fought for, the encroaching turmoil pulled harder at our ties. Suddenly, the boy's hand slipped from mine, a momentary distraction, and as I gasped, a pale light flickered around us, illuminating the chaos like a beacon in the night. The realization crashed over me, the boy's music, our music, was the only thing standing between us and the darkness, and beneath that pale light, a surge of figures emerged, blurring the lines between friend and foe. I clutched my heart as their shadows loomed closer, threatening everything we fought to preserve. In that instant, I felt the tenuous balance of hope tilt toward an unforgiving cliff, the haunting refrain of our collective struggle echoing ominously into the gathered abyss. What cracks lay ahead would surely tear apart everything we thought we held dear. Would our bonds endure, or shatter beneath the weight of unforgiving truth? The chaos exploded around us like a tempest, the fragile threads of our unity unraveling under pressure. Fear surged through the crowd, and desperation clawed at our throats, but at the center, the boy's small frame remained resolute. The pale light shimmered around him, and I could see that despite the crumbling world outside, he clung to the piano, pouring his heart into each note as if to shield us all with sound. "Keep playing." I urged him, my voice barely rising above the clamor. Yet as the sirens grew closer, anticipation twisted tighter in my chest. The girl, too, had regained some of her defiance, stepping forward with every ounce of conviction she could muster. "Can't you see?" she cried out to the crowd, her eyes flashing defiantly. "This is our moment. We cannot let fear grip us. Together, we can rise above this." But her words, though powerful, flickered in the face of mounting panic. People pushed past one another, frantically searching for exits, their faith in our music faltering. The man, still looming nearby, shook his head as if to cast away her hope. "You have no idea what they are capable of." In that moment, I found my own voice again. "You don't know what we've fought to build. We've faced darkness before, and this," I gestured around us, my heart racing, "this is nothing compared to what we can overcome together." The boy's melody began to shift, transforming from singular notes into a resonant symphony that wrapped around us like a protective embrace. It was a call to arms, a balm for our frayed spirits. And yet, with every note, doubt still seeped in like shadows, casting long fingers over our shared courage. Just as I thought we might find our way back, an unexpected figure pushed through the crowd, small yet resolute. It was a girl from our community, her hair wild and untamed as if she had fought her way to us through the chaos. "I heard you. I heard the music," she shouted, her voice a piercing clarity among the swirl. "Don't let them take this from us, just like they took so many others." Hope flickered anew among us with her presence, pulling together the threads of our scattered resolve. Those who stopped to listen began to settle, their expressions softening as the boy played with ever-increasing intensity. The melodies breathed with life once more, swirling around us like a vibrant tapestry of sound. Even the man's expression wavered, the mask of bitterness fracturing slightly under the weight of this unexpected unity. Their eyes met the girl's fierce determination and the man's haunted resignation, manifesting in an unbreakable silence that spoke volumes. Perhaps a glimmer of connection was forming, bridging the deep chasms that had divided us for too long, but just as a fragile calm seemed to blanket the crowd, the cacophony of footsteps echoed closer, accompanied by the wail of sirens that sent my heart plummeting. I caught sight of the figures rushing through the veil of darkness, clad in uniforms that heralded authority. My stomach tightened as I realized their intent: protect the music. I shouted, feeling the stirring urge of unity surge from those gathered. The boy played on, fingers dancing furiously over the keys, the rhythm abounding with desperation. Our voices joined in an impromptu chant, a chant laced with sorrow but also fierce determination, echoing against the tightening noose of fear. "Fight for this." The girl beside me called out. "Fight for each other." But our resolve was not enough to shield us from the outside forces drawing closer. My heart thundered. What would happen to this fragile moment of unity? Would it shatter against the wall of authority descending upon us, washing away the hope we had worked so hard to cultivate? Then, amidst the tide of chaos, the girl, the one returned from the shadows, suddenly winced as if struck by an unseen force. I rushed towards her, instinctively reaching out. "Are you?" Before I could finish, she gasped, her eyes darting wide. I can feel them." "What do you mean?" I asked, riddled with confusion. "I can feel something coming. The music has woken it," she exclaimed, panic lacing her voice. Just then, a sudden blackout enveloped us, smothering the music into silence. The last note hung suspended in time, a poignant reminder of our shared heartbeat. The sirens erupted just outside the fringes of our sanctuary, the figures at the gates, the weight of fate looming over us like the dark clouds I'd always dreaded, and in this moment of unbearable quiet, it struck me like lightning: it wasn't just the darkness outside we had to fear, we had awakened something altogether different, something old and deep that had been sleeping beneath our fractured community. Fear coiled within me like a serpent, and I sensed the shift before I could articulate it. The truth was heavy on my tongue, a revelation that threatened to undermine everything we were fighting for. We had sung for unity, yet what if the darkness we awakened was stronger than the light we clung to? As the silence crashed over us, anticipation electrified the air. What truths would this moment bring to light? Would our music be enough to guide us through the abyss, or would we find ourselves swallowed whole by the very shadows we sought to illuminate? The silence was thick enough to suffocate, a palpable tension wrapping around us as the last vibrations of the boy's melody faded into the oppressive void. I looked into the faces of those gathered, their eyes wide with fear and uncertainty, reflecting a spectrum of emotions from confusion to sorrow, desperation gripping tightly as if it would pull them into the depths. Then, with a shuddering breath, the girl who had joined us from the shadows suddenly lifted her arms, her wild hair framing her determined face with a fierce energy. "We can't let fear take us. Remember why we came together, what we built here." Her voice was strong, cutting through the silence like a beacon, yet I could still see the tremor in her hands, the uncertainty underlying her call. That I took a step forward, feeling the need to bolster her, my heart pounding in time with the fear cascading around us. "She's right. We have always been more than just a gathering of broken pieces, we're a symphony that echoes with resilience, with hope. We may have awakened something, but the ground beneath us trembled suddenly, enough to rattle the wall of our sanctuary." Murmurs erupted, confusion turning to panic as people looked around, instinctively searching for stability amidst an unstable reality. I felt the boy's eyes on me, searching for reassurance as his fingers twitched nervously above the silent keys. I nodded at him, urging him to trust in the music that had always connected us. "Let's try again," I urged gently, my voice carrying more conviction than I felt. "Let the music rise. Even if we're afraid. Even if we're uncertain." With a deep breath, the boy returned to the piano, placing his fingers before the keys as if gathering strength from everyone around him. A soft, tentative note broke the silence, shimmering delicately on the air. But now, something felt different. It was as if the very notes themselves had a weight to them, infused with the fear and hope of us all. The girl raised her voice, harmonizing, her melody weaving through his tentative notes. As the girl and the boy melded their sounds, the eerie silence shifted slightly, breathing life back into our fractured gathering. Here, in this moment of shared fear and emotion, we found a flickering warmth, a pulse beneath the growing storm. But even as the music began to rise, shadows shifted at the fringes of our space, darkness creeping relentlessly closer. Something awakened, an ancient presence that clawed deeper into our core with each note we played, a force that thrived on our fears. I could see it in the way the other members of our community responded. The bravery that had ignited them momentarily flickered like a candle struggling against the wind. Out of the darkened edges, a familiar face emerged. Elena, the wise elder of our community, her once soft features marred by lines of worry that seemed to deepen as she approached. "You must stop," she implored, urgency coloring her words. "You don't understand what you're provoking. We have awakened the old curse, one that hungers for despair." Her words landed heavily, each syllable pulling us back from the precipice of hope. My heart sank as I turned to the girl who had drawn us together moments ago. Her face fell, the spark of resilience dimming. "What curse?" I pressed, desperation slipping from my lips. Elena was all that the girl could manage, her voice shaking. "You said it was just a story. It was never just a story," Elena exclaimed, the quiver in her voice betraying her composure. "Long ago, when our community splintered and fractured, we unleashed something dark in our chaos. That darkness feeds on our bonds, our music, and once awakened, it will consume any spark of unity, but we need to fight it." I shouted, the weight of fear already closing in. "Our music, your music may beckon it," Elena interjected, her tone bordering on desperate. "Instead of healing, do you understand what it might call forth? It's too late for the notes you've played. Resolve this before it draws all our fears into manifestation." At that moment, the boy's fingers froze above the keys, the music cascading into silence once more. The gathered group around us looked between one another, doubt and fear morphing into anxiety that hung heavy in the air. Desperation edged into pity as eyes filled with anguish met mine, and I realized that I hadn't just bolstered their hopes, but I had unleashed a terrible fear. An urgent throb pulsed in my chest, echoing the swirling tension around us. Had our music truly awakened something that we could not contain? And just as the weight of the darkness seemed to thicken, the earth shuddered again violently. This time, a voice whispered from the shadows, weaving through the chaos like a ghostly breeze. "You've called me, you've called us all." Heart racing, I spun towards the source of the whisper, half dreading the truth that loomed before us. I braced for what revelation would be laid bare in this moment of fear and uncertainty, what it meant for our continued struggle. Would the darkness that sought to overshadow our music be something we could face, or had we truly just unraveled everything we had strived to hold together? "Let's rise together," the boy murmured, an echo of stubborn defiance amidst a brewing storm. But his voice was drowned out by the resonance of the whisper, a cruel and haunting melody blending with his own. And then, just as I thought I could discern its shape, everything went black once more, and the world around us began to dissolve into an unfathomable void. The blackness consumed everything, heavy and unyielding. It wasn't just the absence of light, it felt like the absence of hope, a silence that pressed in on all sides. In that moment, I was terrified, yet amid the suffocating darkness, I could still feel the boy's small hand clasped firmly in mine. His grip was a lifeline, an anchor tethering me to something that still resembled reality. Then, a hesitant trill of music emerged from the void, fragile and wavering but resolute. The boy's fingers were dancing across the piano keys, summoning forth notes that weaved a melody from the depths of his spirit, a melody that pierced the darkness, flooding that quiet void with warmth and light. I could scarcely believe how quickly our souls responded, awakening with renewed vigor at the sound that broke through the silence. "Don't give in," I urged, my voice a breathless whisper, reverberating in the quiet. The boy played on, eyes shining fiercely, and the music grew stronger, bolder beyond mere notes. It became our shared heartbeat, an invocation of hope that stretched out into the infinite black. As the melody expanded, it lifted us, unraveling into a cascade of harmonies that echoed off unseen walls, vibrational ripples charging through the darkness around us. I felt the vibrations weave through my bones, igniting something deep within, memories of connection, laughter, sorrow, and, above all, resilience. Together. I shouted into the darkness, a surge of energy coursing through me. Together. I turned my head, searching for those who had once gathered around us in reverberating support. No longer could I see their faces, but I knew they were within reach, their spirits threaded through the symphony, and just like that, the void began to transform. The darkness shifted into shapes, shadows evolving into figures as the crowd reassembled around us, no longer disrupted by fear but reviving in unity. Elena stood beside me, her features softened by the music, eyes wide with wonder. The girl with wild hair drew closer, mirrors of hope reflected in all our faces. "Don't stop!" she cried, spurred on by the energy reverberating between us all, her voice emerging whole and unbroken once again. "Remember who you are. Remember why we came together." The boy's fingers flew across the piano as if they had taken flight, pouring everything he had into the music. The harmony crescendoed, suddenly swelling beyond comprehension, a euphoric wave lifting us all. I could feel the connection crackle through the air like summer lightning, a raw energy that bound our hopes, fears, and desires into a collective voice. With every note that surged forth, the shadows quivered and fell back. What had threatened to consume us reversed, retreating like fog before the sun. A veil lifted, and suddenly, colors emerged, vibrant and vivid, illuminating the space we occupied. Then, with the final flourish of the boy's melody, clarity cut through the last remnants of the darkness. A tangible warmth enveloped USA's shared catharsis that whispered promises of new beginnings and healing. The music hung in the air like fragrant blooms after a storm, a surging reminder that we had been reborn, each of us together, forged anew upon the anvil of our trials. But in the midst of our revelry, I caught sight of the man, one who had sparked our turmoil in the first place. He stood at the edge of our gathering, face haunted yet softened in the light of newfound understanding. The conflict within him shifted as he watched us, eyes glistening with the reflections of our shared resolve. "Can you forgive me?" came his hushed voice, thick with vulnerability. "I never meant to tear you apart." The silence that followed held the breath of 1,000 hearts suspended in uncertainty. I glanced around, feeling the pulse of fear meld into empathy for a man trapped within his own shadows. The boy, still near the piano, stepped forward, gaze unwavering. "You can't take away what's in our hearts. You can try, but love will always find a way to bind us back together." Those simple words unfurled the tightness in my chest, and as I looked into the faces of my companions, I saw a mixture of reflection and acceptance. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain, I added, my voice gaining strength, but it can set us free, and with that awakening, the energy shifted again, no longer caught in the grip of fear. The man took a tentative step toward us, the last shades of doubt flickered in his stare, like embers swirling into the night sky. I see you, his voice trembled, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, not just as children or lost souls but as powerful voices that can't be silenced. He knelt down, lowering himself to the ground to meet the boy's gaze, finding something beautiful in the shared vulnerability between them. And there it was, a small flicker of hope ignited. With one quiet nod, acceptance resonated through the crowd, and the man's shadows began to withdraw, finally confronting the grief he had hidden from all of us. That we stepped toward him, a united front, hearts swelling with the knowledge of our journey still fragile but stronger than we had known. "Let's keep moving forward," the girl with wild hair proclaimed, her voice a beacon illuminating what had begun to blossom anew among us. "Let's keep creating music together, a tapestry of strength and defiance. For every note we share, the darkness shrinks," and so we gathered in, arms linked and hearts intertwined, determined to forge a new path that welcomed all, each one of us vibrant sparks in the fabric of a hopeful tomorrow. With the boy at the piano, we began again. Our voices rose in a powerful harmonia, modern anthem reminding us to cherish the beauty of togetherness amid the storms of life. As I felt the music swell within me, the ache of a long-fought battle transformed into a melody of resounding truth. Together we sang into the night, a hopeful symphony that reverberated long after the last note hung in the air, bright and full of possibility. And as we shared this music, I realized that no matter how dark the night, hope would always find its way back to light. The last line echoed in my heart, for in the symphony of life, even broken notes can play a song worth singing.